Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Twilight Haze Scarf, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description or go to your favorite search engine and simply type in Twilight Haze Scarf Moogly, and it should pop right up. This pattern uses just one skein of Juniper Moon Farm Iris, which is a very lightweight yarn. It also has 437 yards in that one skein, which allows us to make a beautifully oversized scarf, which can block out to 92 inches long and 10.75 inches wide, again, with just that one skein. To make this scarf, I also used a USL 8mm crochet hook. This pattern uses the shell stitch to create a beautiful repeat and a reversible oversized scarf. Let's get started. So as I was saying, this scarf uses a simple shell stitch repeat. You can see right here, we work back and forth in rows for the length of our scarf. And then when we finally hit the end or the length we desire, we come back along here and work a few rows along the side to create this really lovely directional interest and show off the self-striping nature of this yarn. And then as we make that last row along the side, we can add a little bit of edging here to finish off our original edge. As you can see, it makes a very nice sized scarf with just that one skein, and it really is as light as can be. So let's get started. As you can see, this is sort of an unusual skein of yarn. It's got a lot of fuzz to it, a lot of texture. That means I like using a bigger hook size with it, makes it a little bit easier to work with, hence my use of an 8mm. And it also means we want to treat it a little more carefully. Let's see, this hook wants to roll away. Let me set it aside for a second. Now, as I pull the label off here, you can see it's sort of just in this big circle right here. So for this particular style of yarn, I prefer to pull from the outside. Now, takes a couple seconds here, but we find that end. And you can see right away how the fibers in this yarn give it a little bit of stick. It likes to kind of stick to itself. Again, this is why I chose a larger hook size to work with this yarn. It gives us a little more space in our stitches. It also means, though, that we want to be careful to work them as properly and correctly as possible so that we can minimize the frogging or pulling out that we'll need to do. Otherwise, we can go ahead and grab our hook and start crocheting it just as we normally would. So to begin this scarf, I have started with a slip knot on my hook and I've left a few inches there to weave in my end. Then we're going to start by chaining 24. Again, we just want to take our time, especially when we've got sort of a bigger hook with this type of yarn. Really just take your time with those chains. Make sure you use the size of the hook to help determine the size of the chains. And as soon as you've got 24 made, we'll be ready to start row 1. So after you've made your 24 chains, we're going to skip the 3 chains closest to the hook, which will count as our first double crochet of the row. So if you have them, crochet stitch markers can be really helpful for this pattern. We want to use 2, one to mark the first stitch of each row. So let's prepare ourselves here. We're going to double crochet in the stitch after those first 3 chains, so in the 4th chain. Let's count out here 1. And it can be kind of hard to see this yarn, especially when it's really fuzzy. Having a light colored background and bright lights like this are a big help, but you'll still need to concentrate just a little bit. All right, I see those are the 3 stitches I'm going to skip. So I'm going to come to that 4th stitch and put a double crochet in it. And again, I'm just taking my time with this yarn and with these stitches to make sure I get them just right. And to make sure I put my hook in the right spot, because that fuzz does make it just a little bit harder to see. But you can see by using that big hook, it really opens up those stitches for us. Now we're going to work another double crochet in that same chain, like so. There we go. And then after that, we are going to skip the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll sort of put my thumb on that 5th one there. And then we are able to begin our repeat, or the part of the pattern rather that starts with the asterisk. We are going to work a shell in the next chain and then skip 4 chains after that. For this particular pattern, the shell stitch is defined as 5 double crochets all worked into the same stitch. So again, I'm going to yarn over, make sure I skip those 4 chains, come to that 5th one and work 5 double crochets all into that chain. So If you look closely, you may be able to spot that I am working into the underneath loop of the chain, or at least I'm trying to. With a fuzzy yarn like this, again, sometimes it can be really hard to spot, but know that if you're having a hard time finding it, anyone seeing you wearing the scarf will also have a hard time determining exactly where you went into that chain. So whatever works for you at the end of the day will be absolutely fine as long as you're happy with it. You can see the yarn really likes to stick to itself, so I have to keep kind of pulling it out here to straighten it out a little bit. We've got 4 so far. We need one more. There we go. And now we've got our first shell there of 5 double crochets. And that is our repeat. We skip the next 4 stitches and then shell in the next stitch. Or really, I should say, officially, the repeat is shell in the next chain, then skip 4 chains. So that's going to land us to be able to put sort of a half shell to match this one in our last chain. So let's work across here together. We're going to skip the next 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Come to that 5th chain. Again, just take your time with it. And we're going to work a shell right in there, which is 5 double crochets. So 1. Once we've got that chain found, it's a lot easier to go in there again, of course. 2. Back in that same chain again for 3. Straighten out our yarn as needed. 4. And then 5. Now, I need to stop for a second. You can see there's a little bit of tension here. I don't want to be pulling hard against the yarn attached to the skein. That makes my stitches smaller and will throw off my gauge. So I'm going to take a second here to just spool off some more yarn. And as I did that, I realized I never did put that first stitch marker in there, did I? So good time. Always a good time to use a stitch marker. Let's come back to the beginning for just a second. Find the top of that 3rd chain when we skipped those 3 chains at the beginning. And put our stitch marker right in the top as best we can of that 3rd chain. Did I get in there? I think I might have gotten all 3 loops. Let me try that again. Get just the top 2 loops. There we go. So now I have the first stitch marked, and we can continue our repeat across. We're going to skip the next 4 chains, of course. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lands us in that 5th one. Want to sort of straighten those out as best we can. And put another shell stitch in there. 1. Oop. There we are. 2. 3. 4. And 5. Now, because this is a scarf, we know we're not going all too far here. We've only got a couple stitches left. Hopefully we have 5 chains left if I did it right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We do in fact have the correct number of chains. So to finish our repeat, we shall skip 4. That lands us in our last chain. So in the very last chain here, we're going to work 3 double crochets. Remember, generally speaking, when we're making anything rectangular like a scarf or a blanket, we generally, usually, there's always exceptions, but we usually want to finish off each row sort of the same way we began to have that symmetry. So we had that chain 3 and then 2 double crochets at the beginning of the row. So we finish it off with 3 double crochets here right in that very last chain. If I put it down here gently, there we go. This is what it should look like at the end of row 1. So now we're ready for row 2, and I'm going to start again with a chain of 3. In this pattern, a chain of 3 will always count as our first double crochet. If you would prefer to use a double crochet substitute like the chainless starting double crochet or the stacked single crochet, that's up to you. With this yarn being as fuzzy and sort of sticky as it is, not, actually sticky, but sticky to itself, I decided that the chain 3 would keep things just a little bit simpler. But of course, it's your project and you can do it however you like. So after we've got those chain 3s made, we want to go ahead and come right back down into that first stitch and put 2 double crochets in there. This pattern, until we get to the side, in a little more directional action, is essentially a 1-row repeat. And this is the row we're making right now, where we chain 3, 2 double crochets in the first stitch, and then we work a shell in the 3rd or center stitch of each next shell across until we get to that last one. And then, of course, we would finish it off the same way we began. So let's do that together. We come over here to the next shell. We jump all the way over here, find that center double crochet, the one right in the middle, and that's where we work our next shell. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Whole lot easier than working into the chain. Gets so much easier here as we go. Jump to the next shell. Find that center double crochet and put another shell in there. 1, 2. Straighten out my yarn a little bit here so it doesn't get tangled. 3. Oop. Pull that through properly. There we go. 4 and 5. And we've got one more full shell left right here. So we want to put our double crochet in the middle of that one. There's 1, 2. Oh, straighten out our yarn. 3, 4, and 5. And I need to pull up just a little bit more yarn here. For all that it's a worsted weight yarn, it does run pretty quickly off the hook here. There we go. So that brings us to our last little half shell here, or end shell, if you will. So we want to put 3 double crochets right in that last stitch. It mimics, again, what we did to finish the last row. And having that stitch marker in there can help guide you to get your hook in there, but sometimes they want to be in the way, and it's easier to take them out first. That one wants to be in the way, so let me try that again. Get myself lined up here. There we are. Find the top of that 3rd chain. And we can work our 3 double crochets right in there. 1, get that pulled through there. There we go. And 2. And 3. There we go. And this is what it should look like at the end of row 2. And we're just going to repeat exactly what we did for row 2 to create the entire length of our scarf. For me, that was 84 rows. That gave me a great length and left us enough for our side rows that we're going to add on. And it left a little bit extra on the skein to make sure everybody's able to make the full scarf. If you want to make it a little bit longer, you might be able to add a couple of rows, or if you'd like to make it shorter, it's very easy to reduce the number of rows as desired. So go ahead and work the number of rows up through 84, or your desired length, and then we'll be ready to turn and work those rows right along the side. So here I've worked a few more rows of our shell stitch pattern, and you can see how it really builds beautifully on itself. I did miss a stitch if you were watching there in row 2, and I had to pull back and fix it, but luckily I caught it right as I was making the next row. It's the beauty of this pattern. If you do make a mistake, you'll catch it on the very next row. So here we have 6 rows, which is enough to start working our side rows, at least for demonstration purposes. One thing I forgot to note, if you do decide to change the length, make sure you work an even number of rows so that our side rows still work out mathematically. So you can stop at 82 or go to 86 or come up with a number that's just right for you. So now we're going to go on to, in the pattern, what's notated as row 85, where we're going to be, rather than turning to work back the other direction as we've been doing, we're going to turn 90 degrees this way to work right down along the side of our previous rows. So I've got my stitch marker handy to mark my first stitch of this new row here as we work along the sides, and I'm going to start again with a chain of 3. So there's 1, 2, and to make the stitch marker putting in a little bit easier, what I like to do is go ahead and just grab that yarn there as I pull this stitch through, and then I can go ahead and put my stitch marker right in the top of that 3rd chain. And it's just that little bit easier to find. And I think it also leaves it just a little bit bigger and easier to get into. So now, my fingers sort of straightened out. This stuff really is so light and airy, it's hard sometimes to tell it's even on your hands. So, okay, now let's look at our pattern. We are going to work 2 double crochets at the top of the side of this last row. So we kind of want to mimic what we've been doing here in our lengthwise rows here in our widthwise row. So we're going to go right at the top of the side of this double crochet right here. It's a little easier, actually, if I get my fingers out of the way. Right there, we're going to go right in that side of that stitch there, as close to the top as you can get. I always like to grab 2 strands along the side there if I can. We're going to put 2 double crochets right in that space. So there's 1 and 2, like so. There we go. So now what we're going to do, straighten out my yarn a little bit here. After we've worked those 2 double crochets here at the top of that last row, then we skip the next row, which would be right here, and work a shell stitch in the top of the side of the next row, remembering that shell is our 5 double crochets. So we skip this whole row, come to the next row, and we're going to work 5 double crochets right in the top of this stitch here. So I'm going to go right in there. And again, I like to try and grab two strands here along the side. Another thing you can do is also work into right where the previous row sort of is worked into that stitch, if that's easier for you to go into that space instead. But I want to make sure to get all 5 of my double crochets in here. Let me get sort of straightened out again. So there's 3, 4, and 5. There we go. Make sure I got all of them that time. I sure did. All right. And then we skip the next row, and that is our repeat. So skip the next row, 5 shell stitches, or 5 double crochets, a shell stitch, if you will, in the top of the next row. Like so. Just want to take your time when we're working to the edge. It's kind of like working to the chain. And it's really a matter of getting the hook to go in wherever it looks good to you. Don't have to worry about getting it exactly where I did. Working into the edge, I always say, is as much art as it is science. So find a place that you think looks good on your pattern and put them there. See, there's 4 and 5. Now, on our little sample here, of course, we're already getting down to the other end. So as we do that, we can see we would finish our repeat off here, shell stitch in the side of that row, skip the next row, then we get to the end of the pattern, we work 3 double crochets in the side of this foundation row down here, right at the bottom, sort of right along our chain. Because that's really the bottom of our stitch pattern, right? So again, we want to just kind of take some time. I think I'm going to go right there, actually. And the side of that stitch is going to be a lot easier to get my hook in there. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. Just starting to run out of yarn. Let me pull up a little bit more. There we go. So I can finish that stitch. There we go. So in a much shorter version here, this is what it should look like at the end of row 85. So now what we want to do is go right back to the same stitch pattern we were using as we were making our length of our scarf and work 2 more rows right across the side. All right, so here you can see I've worked my smaller version of rows 85, 86, and 87, which brings us right back down here. You can see here's our foundation chain. We're back down at the bottom of the scarf, which means we want to turn it 90 degrees again. I'm not going to turn back to work a row this way. We're going to do another 90-degree turn here so that we can work across our foundation row and really give this a beautiful finished edge. After that, we'll have lovely shells along 3 sides here, a beautiful row of half shells or a stack of half shells along that side, and it really just helps finish off our scarf. So officially, row 88 runs right along the bottom of our scarf here, so let's make that together. Now, to do this one, we're going to start a little differently. We're not going to chain 3 and make a half shell here. We're going to turn this one sort of into a great big shell. We're going to work 3 additional double crochets right in that same spot that we were working in before. So there's 1, 2, and 3. There we go. So now you can see that creates a beautiful little curve right along that edge there and lines us up for working across our foundation chain. So after we have finished that, we are then going to skip 2 rows. So that would be this row and this row, which brings us right down here. We're going to work a shell in the foundation chain at the base of the 3rd double crochet of row 1. Sounds like a lot, but if you look closely, we're just going to skip those 2. You see that right there where we've got our first half shell there in row 1, the first stitch of our foundation chain. That's where we're going to put our first shell right here. We can work right back into that same stitch. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There we go. Now, this yarn really likes to tangle, like I say. So it likes to stick to itself, I should say. So you want to pull up enough to work with, but not too much. That was almost starting to be a little too much. There we go. Now I'm straightened out. So now to continue across this foundation chain, we are going to simply work our shells in the base of the other foundation chains across. You can see we've got 3 here, and you can see the stitch that we worked into, or the chain that we worked in those into. we're going to put our shells right opposite that. So we can go right into those exact same chains. Whole lot easier than trying to count those out again. Luckily, they're a lot easier to spot now. So there's 3 and 4 and 5. There we go. Then we jump right over to the next shell. Go right in the same base there, that same chain. 1. Pull up just a little bit more yarn here at a time. Not too much. 2. 3. Oh, there we go. 4 and 5. Got one more. Let's pull up the yarn for that. There we go. It should be enough, hopefully. Work our 5 shells in the bottom of that next shell, the last full shell there along our foundation chain. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then, if we stop and look at where we're at, that should bring us right back down to that very first sort of half shell right there. So we're going to work 3 double crochets right in that first chain. It's a good reason why I didn't tighten that up. A lot of times when I've got a big first chain like this, I like to tighten it up as soon as I've worked into it. But we want to come back and work our final 3 stitches of the whole pattern in the very first chain, or rather, I should say the very last chain that we worked into, the one right next to the slip knot, the very first one we made. So there we go. Now we have finished our scarf, and we've got this really lovely finished edge. We've worked in both directions and created a lot of interest. All we have to do is break our yarn and weave in our ends. And that's how to crochet the Twilight Haze Scarf. Again, it uses just 1 skein of yarn and an 8mm crochet hook, so I hope you'll give it a try. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.